It started with small things I could ignore if I really tried. Jenna, my wife of 7 years, had been acting distant lately. Not the usual kind of distant where someone's stressed from work or needs some space. This was different, colder, more calculated. Her responses to me were clipped, almost like I was a stranger, not the man she had once shared dreams with. That night, a Friday, I came home from work earlier than usual. The sky was dark, clouds rolling in, a storm brewing. I expected to find her maybe in the kitchen, on her phone or watching TV. But as soon as I opened the door, there she was, standing by the hallway closet, shoving clothes into a suitcase. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice sharp enough to cut through the tension already thick in the air. My heart was thudding in my chest, but I kept my face steady. Maybe she was going somewhere for the weekend, a trip with friends or maybe a surprise for us. But deep down, I knew better. The way she was throwing her clothes into the bag without care, the way she didn't even look up when I entered the house, something was off. "I'm leaving," she said. Just like that. No emotion, no hesitation. "Leaving?" I repeated, like I needed her to confirm that the worst possible scenario was, in fact, happening. She stopped packing for a second, turned to face me, and the look in her eyes was a punch to the gut. Cold, detached. She had never looked at me like that before. Not in all our years together. My stomach dropped, but I kept my cool. "Tyler is what I need now. He's a real man," she said, her lips curling into a smirk. The words hit me like a freight train, knocking the wind out of me. Tyler. The name echoed in my mind. The younger, ripped gym instructor she'd mentioned in passing a few times. I should have seen it coming, all the late-night workouts, the sudden interest in fitness that wasn't there before. But hearing her say it, feeling her disdain roll off her in waves, it was like I didn't even know her anymore. "You were never enough for me," she added, her voice soft but lethal. She grabbed her suitcase and pulled up the zipper in one smooth motion. I was reeling, the ground beneath me shaking. She walked toward the door like she was going on a casual vacation, like the last 7 years meant nothing. Outside, I heard the honk of a car horn. Tyler, no doubt. His timing was perfect, like they had orchestrated this little show to humiliate me. I couldn't speak for a moment. There was no point. What was there to say? To beg her to stay? To ask her why? None of it mattered now. The Jenna I thought I knew was already gone, replaced by someone who didn't care if she destroyed me on her way out. She opened the door, and I followed her to the threshold, watching as she strutted toward Tyler's car. He was there, parked like a king on his throne, his arm hanging out the window, casually honking like he had won some prize. And maybe, in his mind, he had. Jenna didn't even look back. She got in the car, and without so much as a goodbye, they sped off, leaving me standing in the doorway of the house we had built together. The storm clouds overhead broke, rain pouring down, but I didn't move. I just stood there, drenched, replaying the scene in my head. Never enough, real man. The words bounced around in my skull, taking up more and more space until I couldn't think straight. But instead of letting the hurt consume me, something shifted. A cold, hard resolve started to take root. This wasn't going to be the end. I wasn't going to be the pathetic husband left in the dust while she ran off with her gym buddy. No, I wasn't going to sit here and wallow. Jenna thought she was done with me, but I wasn't done with her. I stepped back into the house, my clothes soaked through, and locked the door behind me. The first thing I did was sit down on the couch, trying to process everything. It was surreal. One minute we were married, the next, she was gone. But as the minutes ticked by, a plan started to form in my head. Jenna thought she could just walk away, but she was wrong. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. For the next few hours, I barely moved from the couch. I kept running through all the signs I'd missed, how she'd slowly started to drift away from me, how she became obsessed with going to the gym, how she always seemed to have an excuse to avoid spending time with me. It was all there, plain as day now. I was an idiot for not seeing it sooner. But I wasn't going to be that idiot anymore. The rain pounded against the windows as I stood up, a new energy coursing through me. I wasn't going to sit here and wallow in self-pity. Jenna had made her choice, and now I was going to make mine. I grabbed my phone and started going through her social media, looking for anything that might give me a better picture of where she'd gone with Tyler. She wasn't subtle. There were enough photos, tag locations, and little details she'd posted that made it easy to figure out her favorite spots. I already had a general idea of where she might be hiding, but now I needed specifics. As I scrolled through her feed, something caught my eye, a comment thread under a photo she had posted a week ago at the gym. Tyler had commented something flirty, and Jenna's reply had been just as playful, public, out in the open, like they didn't even care. It made my blood boil. But instead of giving into the rage, I leaned into it. I needed that anger, needed it to fuel me for what was coming next. I spent the rest of the night planning. My first move had to be careful, precise. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming control. If Jenna thought she was moving on to a better life, I was going to make damn sure she regretted it. By the time morning came, I had the skeleton of a plan. I started small, checking our shared bank accounts, making sure she wouldn't have access to the money I'd worked hard for. A few quick clicks, and her name was removed from everything. No warning. She would find out soon enough when her card stopped working. Next, I started thinking about Tyler. He wasn't going to get away clean either. Jenna may have been the one to betray me, but Tyler was just as guilty, if not more so. I dug around, finding every scrap of information I could on him. His gym, his clients, his routines. The guy wasn't that hard to track. He had a habit of posting his every move online like he was some kind of fitness celebrity. I made a few calls to some friends who knew people at his gym. They were more than happy to help me dig up dirt. Within hours, I had enough leverage to start laying the groundwork for what was to come. Tyler was about to find out that messing with someone's marriage had consequences. By the time I finished setting everything in motion, it was late afternoon. I felt more alive than I had in days. This was just the beginning, the first step. Jenna and Tyler thought they were going to ride off into the sunset, but they had no idea what was coming. I wasn't going to just let them go. No, I was going to burn it all down. The day after I set everything in motion, I woke up feeling a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. It was like a fog had lifted, and I could finally see everything clearly. Jenna had walked out, but I wasn't going to sit back and let her move on like nothing had happened. She had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. Tyler was the key. He was her shiny new toy, the one she thought would replace me, and I knew if I could take him down, I'd take her down with him. But first, I needed more information. I wasn't about to launch my plan without having every angle covered. I started by digging deeper into Tyler's life. His social media presence was a goldmine. He had an obnoxious habit of posting every workout, every meal, every moment he thought would make him look like the perfect man. It wasn't hard to figure out his schedule. Mornings at the mom, into a gym, afternoons filled with private training sessions, and evenings with Jenna, either at her place or his. He didn't bother to hide it. He probably thought I was too pathetic to do anything about it, or worse, that I didn't even exist anymore. I set up a burner account and followed his every move online. Tyler was meticulous about his routine, which made it even easier to predict where he'd be at any given moment. I knew which gym he worked at and where he trained his clients. I also knew how Jenna fit into his life, a side piece, nothing more. The thought made me smirk. She had left me for this clown, and she wasn't even his priority. But I wasn't just going to watch. I needed leverage. I reached out to a couple of people I knew at the gym where Tyler worked. They weren't close friends, but they owed me favors, and I was cashing in. I told them to keep an eye on Tyler, report anything suspicious, anything that might help me take him down. It didn't take long. Word got back to me that Tyler wasn't as clean-cut as he pretended to be. Apparently, he had a side hustle, selling performance-enhancing drugs to some of the gym's clients. The idiot couldn't help himself. He needed to feel like the big man, always one step ahead, always stronger, faster, better. This was the break I needed. Armed with this information, I crafted an anonymous email to the gym's management, detailing everything I'd learned. I attached screenshots of Tyler's social media posts, hinting at his involvement in illegal activities, and a few anonymous tips from clients who were willing to confirm the drug sales. It wasn't hard to paint a convincing picture. Tyler was about to find out just how fragile his perfect life really was. I hit send and leaned back in my chair, feeling a sense of satisfaction wash over me. This was just the beginning. It wouldn't take long for the gym to act, and once Tyler's professional reputation was destroyed, I'd move on to the next phase. But I wasn't done yet. While I waited for the fallout from the gym, I kept watching Jenna. I had installed a tracker on her phone weeks ago, long before I confronted her, and it was paying off. I knew every move she made. She wasn't being discreet anymore. In her mind, she had moved on, left me behind, and started her new life with Tyler. She had no idea I was watching her every step, no clue that I was already 5 moves ahead. I noticed she had started spending more time at Tyler's place, staying over there most nights. I imagined them playing house, pretending like everything was perfect. It made me sick, but I wasn't about to let my emotions get in the way. I had a job to do. Then the perfect opportunity fell into my lap. Jenna and Tyler had planned a weekend getaway, some romantic trip out of town. The tracker on her phone gave me all the details, where they were going, when they were leaving, and how long they'd be gone. This was my chance to strike, but I wasn't going to do it in a way they'd expect. No, I wanted to mess with their heads, make them doubt each other, unravel the little fantasy they had built together. I started by hacking into Tyler's phone. It wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. The guy used the same password for everything, and once I was in, I had access to all his messages. I didn't need to see much, just enough to plant the seeds of doubt. I sent a few cryptic texts to Jenna, posing as one of Tyler's other clients. They were vague but suggestive, just enough to make her wonder if Tyler had been seeing someone else behind her back. A simple, "Can't wait to see you again, babe," was all it took to throw her off balance. I knew she'd confront him about it, and I could already picture the argument that would follow. Next, I scheduled an accidental run-in. I knew Jenna liked to go to a specific coffee shop before work, so I made sure to be there, casually sitting at a table when she walked in. She saw me immediately, her face freezing in a mix of surprise and discomfort. I didn't say a word, just smiled like I didn't have a care in the world. It was a calculated move meant to make her feel uneasy. I wanted her to know I wasn't broken. I wasn't sitting at home crying over her. I was in control now, and she could feel it. She didn't approach me, didn't try to talk. Instead, she hurried out of the shop, her confidence cracking just a little more. It was subtle, but I knew I had gotten under her skin. Tyler might have been her escape, but now she was starting to see that there were cracks in their perfect little world. And I wasn't done yet. As the days went by, I kept pushing. I sent more texts, more subtle messages that would sow doubt in Jenna's mind. Tyler didn't even realize what was happening. He was too busy trying to keep up appearances, too caught up in his own ego to notice the cracks forming around him. I watched as their relationship slowly started to unravel piece by piece. The arguments grew more frequent, their time together more strained. They had planned their romantic getaway, but I could tell things weren't as smooth as they once were. Then, just when things were starting to heat up, I got the news I had been waiting for. The gym had received my anonymous tip, and Tyler was officially under investigation. They put him on probation while they looked into the accusations, which meant he was losing clients left and right. Word spread fast in the fitness world, and nobody wanted to be associated with a trainer who was under suspicion of dealing drugs. Tyler's income took a hit, and the pressure started mounting. I could see it all playing out. Tyler was losing control of his professional life, and Jenna was starting to question their relationship. It was a beautiful thing to watch, like watching a carefully laid plan come together. But I wasn't done yet. I still had one more move to make. The weekend trip was coming up fast, and I knew I had to strike while the iron was hot. I had already planted the seeds of doubt, but now I needed to push Jenna over the edge. I hired a woman, someone who looked the part, to get close to Tyler. It wasn't hard. She approached him at the gym, flirted a little, and made sure to get a few pictures of them together. It was innocent enough, but it would be enough to make Jenna's blood boil. The night before their trip, I sent the photos to Jenna's phone, along with a message from an unknown number. You should know who you're really with. It was the final blow, the one that would push her into full-blown paranoia. The next morning, I watched everything unfold. Jenna and Tyler showed up at the airport, bags in hand, ready for their weekend away. But the tension between them was palpable. Jenna was furious, throwing accusations at Tyler as they waited in line to check in. I watched from a distance, hidden in the crowd, as the argument escalated. Tyler tried to defend himself, but Jenna wasn't having it. She was convinced he had been cheating on her, and no amount of explaining could calm her down. It was chaos, and I reveled in it. But I wasn't done yet. I had one more card to play. I had arranged for a friend in law enforcement to show up at the airport. Just as things were reaching their boiling point, Tyler had no idea what was coming. As Jenna stormed off, Tyler was approached by two officers who had received an anonymous tip about his involvement in drug dealing. They didn't arrest him on the spot, but they made a scene, questioning him in front of everyone. It was humiliating, exactly as I had planned. As Tyler was being led away for questioning, he glanced over his shoulder, his eyes meeting mine for the briefest moment. I gave him a slight nod, just enough to let him know that I was behind it all. His face twisted in confusion and anger, but there was nothing he could do. He was trapped. Jenna stood off to the side, her face pale and her hands trembling. She had no idea what was happening, but I could see it in her eyes. She was starting to put the pieces together. This wasn't just about Tyler. This was about me. I had been behind the scenes the whole time, pulling the strings, and now she was finally beginning to understand just how deep this went. I left the airport before the situation escalated further, a satisfied smirk on my face. Everything was falling apart for them, just as I had planned. They had no idea what was coming next, but I did. I was just getting started. Walking out of that airport, I could still feel the weight of Tyler's confused stare on my back. That brief moment of realization in his eyes had been satisfying, but there was no time to rest. The satisfaction was short-lived, as it always is when you're in control of every piece of the game. I had done my part. The seeds of destruction were firmly planted. But this was far from over, and I wasn't going to be passive. Tyler's professional reputation was in shambles, his income drying up, and Jenna, well, she was barely holding on. That was just the beginning. I wanted more. By the time I got back home, I felt the buzz of my phone in my pocket. Jenna again. Over the past few days, she'd been trying to reach me more and more, leaving voicemail after voicemail, each one a little more desperate than the last. I didn't pick up, didn't listen to the messages. They weren't worth my time. She could stew in her confusion. That was part of the plan, to let her anxiety grow, feeding on her paranoia until it consumed her. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the unopened bottle for a moment before twisting off the cap. It wasn't guilt that I felt, not even close, but something else. Something darker, maybe. A deep sense of satisfaction twisted with a cold realization. I was enjoying this. Watching them crumble step by step was becoming addictive. Just then my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Jenna. It was an email alert, more fallout from the gym. I clicked it open, and there it was, confirmation that Tyler had officially been suspended pending a full investigation. The accusations had stuck. I leaned back in my chair, sipping the beer slowly, savoring the moment. He was done. Jenna had left me for a guy whose career was now swirling down the drain. The irony wasn't lost on me. I glanced at the clock. It was late. Jenna and Tyler would be back from their ruined weekend by now, and I could already imagine the scene. More arguments, more distrust, more cracks forming in their perfect little world. It was almost too easy, but something gnawed at the back of my mind, an unfinished feeling. This wasn't enough. Not yet. I pulled up the tracking app on my phone. Jenna's location pinged. Her apartment. Alone. Good. I couldn't resist. I sent her a single text. We should talk. No more, no less. Then I tossed my phone on the table and waited. Her reply came within seconds. Where? Typical. She was probably hoping this was the moment we'd have a heart-to-heart, that I'd come crawling back with some pathetic apology or plea to get back together. She had no idea what I had planned. I replied with the address of a small, out-of-the-way diner, neutral territory. She wouldn't feel threatened there, and that's exactly what I needed her to believe. It was all about control. I grabbed my keys and headed out, the night air cool against my skin as I made my way to the car. By the time I got to the diner, she was already there, sitting in a booth near the back, her eyes scanning the parking lot nervously. As I walked in, her face lit up, a flicker of hope crossing her expression. She thought she had won, that I had finally broken down. I slid into the booth across from her, not saying a word. She studied me for a moment, her hands fiddling with the edge of her sleeve. David, she started, her voice softer than I remembered. I don't know what's happening, but Tyler, things aren't what I thought. It's falling apart, and Stop, I said, my voice cutting through her rambling. She froze, her mouth half open. This isn't about Tyler. It's about you. Her eyes widened, and for a split second, I saw fear flicker behind them. Good. I know everything, I continued, keeping my voice calm, measured. The affair, the lyces, the whole charade you've been playing. But you already knew that, didn't you? She swallowed, her fingers now gripping the edge of the table. She began, but I cut her off again. You thought you could walk away from this, Jenna? That you could move on, find some new life with Tyler, and I'd just disappear? She didn't say anything. She couldn't. She wasn't used to this version of me, the one who was in control. The one who wasn't broken. You're scared now, aren't you? I asked, leaning forward slightly. You're starting to realize that you've lost, that you made the wrong choice. Her breath hitched, and I could see her struggling to hold herself together. She tried to say something, but the words wouldn't come. I let the silence hang between us for a few moments before leaning back in my seat, watching her crumble. You don't get to walk away from this, Jenna, not without paying for what you did. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out except a faint, trembling sound. She was unraveling right in front of me, and it was exactly what I wanted. I stood up, tossing a couple of bills on the table to cover the coffee I hadn't ordered. This isn't over, I said, turning to leave. Not even close. As I walked out, I could feel her eyes on me, burning with confusion and desperation. But there was nothing she could do now. The trap was already set, and she was right where I wanted her. I drove home, the coldness settling deeper in my chest. There was no turning back now. I had tasted control, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. Jenna had underestimated me, and now she was going to pay for it. But there was more to come. Tyler had been the first target, but now it was Jenna's turn. She was the one who had betrayed me, the one who had made me feel like nothing. It was time to take everything from her, just like she had taken from me, and I already knew exactly how to do it. The next morning, I got to work. I reached out to the lawyers handling our divorce, making sure every move was in my favor. Jenna wasn't going to get a single dime more than she deserved. I froze every joint account, cut off her access to anything that could help her financially. By the time she realized what was happening, it would be too late. I wasn't done there. I started gathering everything I needed to expose her affair to the people who mattered. Her family, her friends, her colleagues. I compiled the photos, the texts, every piece of evidence that showed her for who she really was. A liar, a cheater. The plan was simple. Take away her reputation, her dignity, her entire support system. Make sure that when people looked at her, they saw the real Jenna, the one who had left her husband for a guy who couldn't even keep his job. And once that was done, I'd move in for the final blow. The weeks passed, and I watched it all unfold. Jenna's world was collapsing, just like I had planned. The calls from her stopped, replaced by desperate texts that went unanswered. Her life with Tyler was in shambles. His career was over, and the accusations against him were too strong to fight. I'd seen to that. Their relationship was hanging by a thread, and every time she tried to reach out to me, I let her squirm a little longer. I stayed one step ahead, feeding her just enough information to keep her guessing. She was unraveling, her paranoia growing with every passing day. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about her losing everything she had tried to build, everything she had thought was hers. And then, when I was ready, I made my next move. I leaked everything, our divorce proceedings, the details of her affair, the way she had left me for someone who was nothing more than a washed-up trainer with a drug problem. It spread fast, faster than even I had anticipated. Her colleagues distanced themselves. Her friends stopped returning her calls. Her family, well, they were devastated. Jenna was alone now, and she knew it. I sat back and watched it all burn, the satisfaction coursing through me like fire. But as the dust settled, something unexpected happened. For the first time, I felt nothing, no joy, no pride, just a hollow emptiness where my anger had once been. I had won. I had taken everything from her, just like I had promised. And yet, it didn't feel like enough. I thought about calling her, confronting her one last time, but what was the point? She was broken, and I had made sure of that. She had nothing left, and neither did I. In the end, revenge hadn't fixed anything. It had just left me standing alone in the ruins of what had once been our life. I watched Jenna's life collapse from a distance. She was unraveling at the seams, and it was playing out exactly how I wanted. The fallout from her affair had hit her hard. Friends had turned their backs, her family was in shock, and professionally, she was hanging on by a thread. Tyler was nowhere to be seen, his life, his reputation destroyed. The consequences of their choices were piling up, and I reveled in it. Yet, there was still one last move to make. The final piece of my plan involved exposing her completely, leaving her without a single shred of the life she thought she could have. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about making sure she understood. She couldn't walk away from this without facing the consequences. I made my next move, releasing every single piece of damning evidence I had collected over the past few months. It started with a quiet email to her employer. I kept it simple, professional. I laid out the facts, provided screenshots, and attached the most incriminating text between her and Tyler. The photos of them together, smiling at the gym, laughing in public while I was at home, unaware of their betrayal, were enough to do the damage. They'd look like a couple of fools now. One a washed-up trainer, the other a woman who destroyed her marriage for a man who was no longer relevant. I knew her company had a reputation to maintain, and they wouldn't hesitate to protect it. Within 24 hours, I heard whispers that Jenna was being called into meetings, questioned, and scrutinized. People were starting to look at her differently. I made sure that those whispers turned into full-blown rumors. Her workplace, her reputation, and her sense of security were all slipping away. And still, I wasn't done. I sent similar evidence to her family. Her parents were old school, traditional, the kind of people who valued loyalty and integrity above all else. I had no doubt that her affair would devastate them. It wasn't about destroying her relationship with her parents. It was about ensuring she had no support system left to fall back on. They needed to know who she had become, and they would never look at her the same way again. With every message I sent, I could feel the weight lifting off me. This was what I had been building toward. I could imagine her world closing in on her, tighter and tighter, with every revelation. The perfect life she had envisioned with Tyler was disintegrating, and I had made sure she couldn't rebuild it. But I wasn't done yet. The final blow had to be something personal, something that would shatter the last remnants of pride she might be clinging to. I had been saving the engagement ring I had planned to give her years ago, back when I thought we still had a future together. It had stayed hidden away in a drawer, a reminder of what could have been. Now it was time to use it one last time, not as a symbol of love, but as a weapon. I mailed the ring to her apartment. Inside the box was a simple note: "Remember who you left behind." I didn't need to explain more than that. She would know exactly what it meant. And with that final action, I cut her off. No more games, no more responses to her desperate attempts to contact me. I was done. I leaned back, staring at the remnants of the life we once shared. It was strange. After all the chaos, all the destruction I had set in motion, I felt nothing. There was no satisfaction, no sense of completion. I had gotten my revenge. I had taken everything from her. But in the end, what did I really gain? The house was still empty, the silence still suffocating. A few weeks passed, and Jenna's name seemed to disappear from my life entirely. The calls stopped. The texts were fewer and farther between. I imagined she had reached a breaking point. Whether it was her career, her relationships, or just her own psyche, I didn't know. And honestly, I didn't care anymore. The satisfaction I'd thought revenge would bring had dissolved into a hollow, lingering emptiness. As I sat in the same house where it all began, I realized something crucial. This wasn't about Jenna anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. This had been about me, about control, about feeling like I had some power in a situation where I'd been stripped of it. Now, with everything done, I was left standing in the ruins of the life we'd built, just as broken as the world I'd torn down. But life goes on, doesn't it? One morning I woke up to an unexpected knock on the door. I wasn't sure what to expect. After all, I had closed the book on Jenna, on everything. As I opened the door, there she was, standing on the porch, her face hollowed out by stress and anxiety. She looked nothing like the woman who had confidently walked out of my life months ago. "David," she began, her voice trembling. I stood there watching her, a part of me curious about what she had to say, another part completely indifferent. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my tone flat. I wanted to talk. Please." There was a time when hearing her plead would have brought me some kind of satisfaction. But now it just felt like noise. I leaned against the door frame, giving her a few seconds to say whatever she came to say. "I'm sorry, David," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "I messed up. I didn't realize what I was doing until it was too late." I waited for her to finish, to get to the point. "I lost everything," she continued, her voice breaking. "Tyler's gone. My job is gone. My family, they won't even talk to me anymore. I know it's all my fault, but I'm asking for your forgiveness. I should have felt something, anger, joy, maybe even pity, but all I felt was exhaustion. I had spent so much time building my revenge, piece by piece, that now, standing in front of her, I just wanted it to be over. "I don't forgive you," I said, the words coming out colder than I expected. "And I don't care. You made your choices, Jenna. Now you have to live with them." Her face crumpled as she realized there was no coming back from this. She had destroyed everything, and now there was no one left to pick up the pieces. She turned to leave, and for a moment I thought about stopping her, about offering her some small bit of kindness. But I didn't. I watched as she walked away, her shoulders slumped, disappearing from my life for what I hoped would be the last time. I closed the door, the weight of finality settling in. There was no turning back now. Jenna was gone, and my revenge was complete. As the weeks passed, I focused on rebuilding my life. The rage that had once consumed me had faded, replaced by a strange sense of calm. I had won, but the victory was hollow. It had always been about more than just Jenna. It was about reclaiming my life, my sense of control. And now, without her in the picture, I could finally do that. I started taking small steps, one at a time. I went back to work, reconnected with old friends, and even started going to the gym again. I wasn't doing it for anyone but myself this time. Slowly, I began to feel like a person again, like the man I had been before Jenna's betrayal had torn me apart. And yet, there was always that lingering sense of emptiness. It was hard to shake the feeling that, despite everything, I had lost something important along the way. Maybe it was the years we had spent together, or maybe it was just the realization that revenge doesn't heal wounds, it only deepens them. I never heard from Jenna again. Tyler was gone too, his life in tatters. I didn't bother checking up on them anymore. There was no point. They were out of my life, and that was enough for me. In the end, revenge hadn't brought the closure I thought it would. It had only left me standing alone in the aftermath, wondering if it had all been worth it. But as I looked around at the life I was slowly rebuilding, I realized that maybe, just maybe, it had been. Because now, for the first time in a long time, I was finally in control. Jenna's desperate attempts to salvage whatever was left of her life had been pathetic to watch. She spiraled into paranoia, frantically reaching out to anyone who might listen, but no one was there. Tyler was long gone. Her family had turned their backs, and her colleagues no longer trusted her. Everything I had planned was falling into place, but as I stood there watching her world burn, I knew this wasn't enough. The final confrontation was coming, and I had to make sure she felt every ounce of the pain she'd inflicted on me. It was time to end this. Jenna had been calling me nonstop, begging for answers, for some kind of reconciliation. I hadn't answered a single one. Her texts were coming in faster now, more frantic, her messages laced with confusion and desperation. I could feel her slipping, her mind unraveling, and I let it happen. Every ignored call, every unanswered message was another twist of the knife. She deserved this. She needed to feel powerless, just like she'd made me feel when she walked out of my life. One afternoon, as I sat in my living room, the phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't ignore it. I picked it up, feeling a strange calm wash over me as I saw her name flash on the screen. I answered, but didn't say a word. I let the silence stretch between us, hearing her shaky breaths on the other end. David, are you there?" I stayed quiet, waiting for her to continue. "Please, I don't know what's happening," she stammered. "Everything's falling apart. I need to talk to you, please." Her voice cracked with emotion, and for a split second I almost felt a flicker of pity. But then I remembered how she'd stood in our house, packing her things while Tyler waited outside, honking like he'd won. She had walked out like I was nothing. I wasn't about to let her forget that. "What do you want, Jenna?" I finally said, my voice low and controlled. I I just need to know, why? Why are you doing this?" she asked, her words rushing out, desperate and broken. I smiled to myself, leaning back into the couch, savoring the moment. "You still don't get it, do you? You thought you could just walk away, start over with Tyler, and leave me in the dust. But that's not how this works." There was a long pause, and I could hear her trying to steady her breathing. "David, I made a mistake. I know that now. Tyler, he's gone. Everything is gone. Please, can we just talk? I'll do anything. Just tell me what you want." This was it. The final push. I had her right where I wanted her, completely broken, begging for answers she wasn't ready to hear. "Meet me," I said. "Tomorrow night. The park near the old coffee shop. 8 o'clock. Be there, and maybe I'll tell you what you want to know." Without waiting for her reply, I hung up. The stage was set, and now it was time for the final confrontation. She thought she had lost everything, but she hadn't seen anything yet. Tomorrow, I'd finish this once and for all. The next evening, I arrived at the park just before 8, the cool air biting at my skin as I leaned against a bench under the dim glow of a streetlight. The park was quiet, almost deserted, just the way I'd planned. I needed this to be private. I needed her to feel like there was nowhere left to run. I saw her before she saw me. She was pacing near the edge of the park, glancing around nervously, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She looked smaller, more fragile than I remembered. Gone was the confident woman who had walked out of our house with a smirk on her face. Now she was just a shell of the person she used to be. I stepped out from the shadows, walking toward her with deliberate, slow steps. She froze when she saw me, her eyes wide with a mix of relief and fear. "David," she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't say anything at first, just stood there, letting her feel the weight of my presence. She looked like she wanted to run, but she didn't. She was trapped, and she knew it. "You wanted to talk," I finally said, my tone cold and detached. "So, talk." She swallowed hard, her hands trembling as she took a step toward me. "I'm sorry for everything. I didn't realize. I didn't know it would end like this." And like what, Jenna? I asked, my voice cutting through the night. You thought you could leave me for someone like Tyler and just move on? That I'd be sitting at home, waiting for you to come crawling back when it all fell apart? No, I wasn't thinking straight, she stammered, her words tumbling out in a frantic rush. It was a mistake. I made a horrible mistake, and I've lost everything because of it. Tyler's gone, my job, my family, they don't even talk to me anymore. I stared at her, unmoved. She was playing the victim now, but she wasn't the victim. She was the one who had destroyed everything, and now she was dealing with the consequences. David, please, she begged, her voice breaking. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it, but I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this. Her words hung in the air, thick with desperation. But I wasn't going to give her what she wanted. This wasn't about making her feel better. This was about making sure she understood once and for all that actions have consequences. I told you from the beginning, Jenna, you don't get to walk away from this, I said, my voice hard as stone. You don't get to walk away from me. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I thought she might break down completely. But she didn't. She just stood there, trembling, waiting for me to continue. You thought Tyler was your way out. You thought he was your real man, the one who could give you everything I couldn't. And look where that got you. He's gone, just like everything else in your life. You're alone, Jenna, completely and utterly alone. The words hit her like a sledgehammer. I could see the realization sinking in, the weight of everything she'd done crashing down on her all at once. I didn't know, she whispered, barely able to get the words out. I didn't know it would be like this. You knew, I said, stepping closer to her, my voice low and menacing. You just didn't care. You didn't care what it would do to me, what it would do to our life. You wanted something else, and you were willing to destroy everything to get it. Her shoulders slumped, and she covered her face with her hands, her body shaking with silent sobs. It should have felt good to see her like this, to see her broken and defeated, but instead, I felt nothing. Just emptiness. I can't go back, she choked out between sobs. There's nothing left for me. For a long moment, I didn't say anything. I just watched her, watched the woman who had once meant everything to me crumble before my eyes. And then, something inside me shifted. You're right, I said quietly. There's nothing left for you. Not with me. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen, searching my face for any sign of hope. But there was none. I had made my choice just like she had made hers. This is the end, Jenna, I said, my voice cold and final. You're on your own now. Her face crumpled as the last bit of hope drained from her eyes. She didn't argue, didn't beg. She knew it was over. Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in the cold, alone with the wreckage of the life she had destroyed. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to say. As I walked through the empty park, a strange sense of calm settled over me. The confrontation had played out exactly as I'd imagined, but instead of feeling triumphant, all I felt was a quiet resignation. I had gotten my revenge. I had torn her world apart, piece by piece, just like she had done to mine. But in the end, what had I really won? The truth was, Jenna wasn't the only one who had lost everything. I had lost too. I had lost the man I used to be, the man who believed in love and trust and loyalty. Now, all that was left was the cold, hollow shell of the person I had become. But maybe that was the point. Maybe this was who I was now. And maybe, just maybe, I was okay with that. A few months passed after that night in the park. The whole ordeal with Jenna, the revenge, and the confrontation that had ended everything. None of it occupied my thoughts as much anymore. At first, I expected the satisfaction of revenge to last, to fuel me through whatever came next. But as the days rolled on, I found myself feeling lighter. It wasn't the kind of triumph I thought it would be. Instead, it was a quiet calm. I had cut her out, and in doing so, I had freed myself. I focused on rebuilding my life. I threw myself back into work, picking up projects I'd neglected during the mess with Jenna and Tyler. My colleagues noticed the change in me. less distracted, more driven, but they didn't ask questions. If anything, they seemed relieved that I wasn't the brooding figure they'd seen for months. I was different, but not in the way I expected. I didn't feel stronger or superior for what I'd done. I just felt done. Sometimes I'd catch myself thinking back to that moment in the park, seeing Jenna crumble in front of me. A part of me had wanted that for so long, to see her realize the gravity of what she'd done. But now, with distance, I could see that revenge had only been a temporary fix. Destroying her didn't fix me. It didn't rebuild the man I had been before her betrayal. But there was a strange comfort in that realization. It wasn't about rebuilding the old me. That person was gone, and maybe that was for the best. The man who had loved Jenna, who had trusted her, was dead the moment she smirked at me and told me she'd found a real man. That version of me would never come back, and I had to accept that. In its place, I had something else: control. Not just over Jenna or the situation we'd been in, but over myself. I had control of my life in a way I hadn't felt in years. The chaos of her affair, the months of plotting revenge, all of it had forced me to focus on one thing: getting back at her. But now, with that goal behind me, I realized that I could finally focus on myself. I started going to the gym again, not because I wanted to look better for someone else, but because it felt good. The physical exertion, the routine, it grounded me. My mornings were no longer clouded by thoughts of Jenna and what she was doing. I woke up early, hit the gym, and by the time I sat down at my desk at work, I felt clear-headed. I hadn't felt like that in years. I even started reconnecting with some old friends, people I had distanced myself from while my marriage had been crumbling. We met for drinks, watched games, and talked about everything except what had happened with Jenna. They knew, of course. Word had spread in small circles about our divorce, about her affair with Tyler, but they respected my silence on the matter. I appreciated that. I didn't need to rehash it with them. It was behind me. The house, though, that was something I couldn't shake off so easily. Every room was a reminder of the life we'd built together. It wasn't that I missed her. No, that part was dead and buried, but the echoes of the past lingered in every corner of that place. The living room where we'd watch movies, the kitchen where we'd cook together, it was all tainted now, a monument to what had been lost. So I sold it. It wasn't a rash decision. I thought about it for weeks, weighing the pros and cons of holding on to the property, of maybe renting it out. But in the end, it was too tied to a version of my life that no longer existed. I needed a clean break. Selling the house was just another step in letting go of everything connected to her. I moved into a smaller apartment on the other side of town. It was a fresh start, and the simplicity of it was exactly what I needed. No memories attached to the walls, no ghosts of a broken marriage lurking in the shadows. It was just me, my things, and a future I could shape however I wanted. A few times I thought about Jenna, not in any deep emotional way, just brief flashes, wondering what had become of her. She had tried to reach out a few more times after that night in the park, but I ignored every call, every text. She had made her bed, and I was done with her. Still, I couldn't help but be curious about how she was dealing with the fallout. Was she still working? Had she managed to piece together some semblance of a life after everything had fallen apart? I doubted it. People like Jenna don't rebuild easily. Once they fall, they keep falling. I never checked, though. I didn't stalk her social media, didn't ask around. The satisfaction of watching her life crumble had faded, and I had no desire to keep tabs on her misery. It didn't serve me anymore. She was in the past, and that's where she belonged. A few months after I moved, I ran into an old friend of hers at a coffee shop. We didn't exchange more than pleasantries, but I could see the flicker of recognition in her eyes, the unspoken knowledge of what had happened between Jenna and me. She didn't bring it up, and I didn't ask, but as I walked out with my coffee, I wondered how many people in our old social circles still talked about it. I wondered if Jenna had become a cautionary tale, a whispered story of infidelity and downfall, but I didn't dwell on it. That was the difference now. Before, it would have consumed me. I would have spent hours thinking about it. wondering what people were saying, replaying everything that had happened. But now I let it slide off me. I had moved on, in the truest sense of the word. I had built a new routine, a new life. Work was steady, and I found myself thriving in ways I hadn't expected. Without the weight of Jenna dragging me down, I could focus on my career, on things I cared about. I even started thinking about traveling again, something I hadn't done since we got married. There was a freedom in it, the idea that I could pick up and go whenever I wanted, without anyone to answer to. One night, as I sat in my new apartment, I reflected on everything that had happened. From the moment I discovered her affair, to the months of planning my revenge, to the final confrontation that had severed the last ties between us. It was strange to think how much of my life had revolved around her betrayal. I had spent so much time trying to get back at her, to make her feel the pain I had felt, that I had almost forgotten what it was like to live for myself. But now that chapter was closed. I didn't feel any lingering bitterness, no hatred or anger. In fact, I realized that I didn't feel much of anything toward her anymore. She was just someone I used to know, someone who had been a part of my life, but who no longer had any hold on me. The scars were there, sure, but they were just that, scars. Faded reminders of a battle I had fought and I had won. In the end, that was what mattered. Not the revenge, not the satisfaction of seeing her broken, but the fact that I had come out on the other side stronger. I had reclaimed my life piece by piece, and now, for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control. Not of her, not of the situation, but of myself. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a long breath. The city lights flickered outside my window, a constant reminder that life moved on no matter what. Jenna was out there somewhere, probably still picking up the pieces of her shattered life. But I wasn't thinking about her anymore. I was thinking about my next steps, my next chapter. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free.